Built it right, built it strong, built it fast, built it done, built it true, built it real, yeah, I built it.
All right, what do we got going on today? What's on the agenda? What to talk about? You know, something I was thinking about after last time we chatted about feedback versus feed forward is the different types of arbitrary demarcations there are in project lingo. What I mean is the difference between project development and project management and project leadership, project planning, project strategy, project retirement, project completion, like all of these words that we like to throw around related to projects. We have a whole lexicon, a whole glossary of words associated with projects. Yet at the same time, we have all this stuff. We don't really have a unified model, a unified understanding of what a project even is, right? We don't have a necessarily a foundational, a fundamental understanding of what all of these terms are trying to explain, right? Like, what do we mean when we're saying, oh, we're doing project development? I mean, everyone has an idea. It means you're developing the project. Yeah, but is that related to planning? Is that related to strategy? Is that related to leadership? What does project development just mean in any activity during developing a project? Is it more on the front end? Is it more on the close down, the wrap up? You know, these words, they don't necessarily mean a whole heck of a lot if you don't have some sort of fundamental understanding or fundamental framework of how you think about a project, of when someone says, hey, I'm working on a project, what pops into your head, right? What pops into your head? That's a genuine question. What pops into your head if I say project, right? Does chaos pop into your head? I think for most people, it probably does. You know, projects can be pretty chaotic. And what I'd like to talk about here is really the beauty of all of these terms when we actually have a fundamental understanding or mental model about projects. Really, this gets back to those three fundamental building blocks of a project, right? You got the needs, you got your resources that you use to develop a solution, and then you got your 6 tasks that connect those building blocks, right? Those things that we do to bring it all together. And that is the scoping. We use scoping to connect a need we use scoping to limit the needs that we're addressing based off the resources we have, right? Given what we got, what's realistic to do? Then we use do provisioning, and that just asks almost the opposite, which says, hey, given what we need to do, what resources do we need to get? So then you have a specification, which asks, given the need that we've decided to address, what are we exactly going to build, right? What's in our spec? What's the plan? Delivery, all right, given that plan, given the resources we got, given everything we got going on, let's build the thing. Let's get it done. Verification, which tests did we get it done correctly? And validation, which tests that our solution actually solved the problem. Now, those 6 activities or 6 tasks you have to do in any project, just like with those fundamental building blocks. But I bet you very few people, when you think of project, when I say the word project, do you have a clear idea of what you're getting yourself into, right? Do you have a clear mental model of, hey, I'm working on a project today, and I need these 6 tasks. I need to think about these 6 tasks. I need to flesh them out, all right? I know exactly what the need is. I know what the resources I got are. I know the solution, right? Do you have a clear mental model? Because if you don't, and I say, hey, let's do some project planning, what does that mean? How do you know when to start? How do you know when to stop? How do you know what the heck that even means? If I say, hey, let's do some project development, what does that mean? That could be pretty arbitrary. Does that mean we're gonna go out to dinner and have a good time and talk office politics? Or does that mean we're gonna sit down and get into the weeds writing some code? Right? What exactly does project development even mean? Project leadership, same thing. What are you leading? Right? I could say project leadership, but if you don't have a clear idea, right? If you don't have a clear idea of what the word project even means, then how do you know what the phrase project leadership means? The same thing can go with all of it, right? If you don't have a clear idea, a clear model in your mind of what a project is, if I say project strategy, well, what does that mean? I know what strategy is, but if I don't know what a project is, how do I know what project strategy is? And this is a problem I'm seeing. This is a big problem I'm seeing is talking to people, and they honestly don't know what the heck a project is. They have no model of the boundaries of a project, the limits. They don't know where a project starts and another one stops. Hey guys, some lovely neighbors. And they don't have a clear idea of what the phrase leadership, management, any of that means without a clear understanding of the word project, right? And so thinking about what are some common alternatives, right? So that's my model, right? That's a model I call making pattern, right? I call the making pattern. Why do I call it making pattern as the name of that model? It's because it's the pattern of how things get made, right? And well, what's a project? Well, it's making something happen, right? So it seems pretty apropos to say, hey, here's the fundamental model, here's the pattern of how projects get done, of how stuff gets made. So I call it making pattern. And so that is a model of project, right? It is a model of the structure, the actual anatomy, the way projects are built as a body. Think about it that way. You know, you got your cardiovascular system, you got your muscular skeletal system, your neurological system, your digestive system, your lymphatic system. You got all of these things that make up a body, right? What are the parts that make up a project, right? You got your building blocks and then you got the tasks. Those are the parts, right? And you got the dynamics built in there too. And a project is just the thing that happens over time when those things, when the needs and the solutions come together through some work. But what are some other ideas about what a project is, right? Well, let's think about it. What's your conception of what a project is? If it isn't solving a need, right? Presenting a solution, well, what is it? Maybe you say, oh, it's just something that I'm working on. Okay, cool, something you're working on. That's a project. I mean, that's fair. But what does it mean when I say you're doing project management, right? So you're managing just something you're working on. Okay, but how well does that scale, right? How well does that work outside yourself and I? How well does that definition of a project grow as your team grows, right? You need some sort of unified idea that when you bring something to a group, it's a model that everyone can share. It's a framework, it's a way of thinking about that term project that everyone's on the same page about. What happens if you're not on the same page? Well, let's talk about it, right? If me and you have completely different ideas about what a project is and where it starts, where it stops, what does it entail, we're gonna have some problems when I start saying things like project management. project development, project strategy. You're gonna have a lot of problems because now all of a sudden we're talking past each other, right? You think you know what each other are saying, but in reality, you might not. All right, let's get this more concrete. Let's say you and your boss are sitting down and they say to you, hey, we're gonna kickstart a new project. So because of that, I want you to drop everything you're doing and start writing up a software patch. Okay, let's say there's a user, some sort of bug in the system. Okay, and I need you to write up a patch. Okay, you're gonna get in there and you're gonna fix it. And let's get on that pronto. Great. Now, if your boss is just managing you and your brain is off, that's fine. But if you don't have the same idea of a project, do you automatically know that verification is part of that? Do you automatically know that you need to actually ask him or her what the scope of this work is, right? They said, hey, I need a patch for this bug in the system. But how do you know, if you don't have a clear idea of a project, how to push back, how to say, okay, boss man, where does this start and where does it stop? What are my responsibilities? What role do I have in this project? Do I have to do verification too? Do I have to do validation? Am I just doing delivery? Who spec'd it out? Right? If you don't understand, if you don't have a clear idea of the parts of a project, you're kind of left in the dark. And that's honestly, from the conversations I'm having, people say yes to work all the time without necessarily considering what taking on that new project entails. And I think that should be pretty alarming, or pretty disturbing. If you don't have a good theory, maybe we'll call it that, a theory of projects sitting in between your two ears, how do you know the questions to ask? How do you know what's important to address? How do you know when to push back? How to call out issues when you see them? Right? These are big problems if you don't have a good understanding of a project, right? What's nice about making pattern is that it gives you a framework to think in. It gives you something, but it's structural, which is very different than, say, waterfall, right? Waterfall says it's more about the life cycle of a project, but it doesn't actually, interestingly enough, define what a project even is structurally, right? So it's like saying, hey, something can run. Well, a lot of things can run. A cheetah can run, a gorilla can run, a human can run, but those three different things, and you know what else can run? A refrigerator can run. But each of those things running means something very, very different. Looks different, anatomically works different, and even can mean something different in the case of the refrigerator, right? So if I say, hey, I'm working on a project, and here's a project over its life cycle, in the planning phase all the way through the execution phase and so on, without a shared understanding of what a project even is, you're gonna have some serious potential miscommunication. I'm walking through the construction zone of this development right now. Lots of projects going on. So I think in general, what I'm trying to offer here during these walk-in talks is a shared understanding and language around what a project is. So that way, when you walk into a room and all of a sudden a new project is thrown at you, you have the mental scaffolding, the mental fortitude, the mental wherewithal to be able to say, great, what's the scope? What resources do we need to provide? And that way you look like a stinking genius. That way you don't get yourself into hot water, don't get your team into hot water, because you actually know what you mean when you say project development. You know what you mean when you say project leadership. you're not just throwing around business jargon, which is more or less what I think those terms are in everyday language. So let's get into what I mean by those terms through the lens of making pattern, okay? So what is project development through that lens of those 3 building blocks in 6 tasks? Well, development is at any stage of the project, from planning all the way through execution, completion, and depending on the type of project, retirement of whatever the solution is, right? So maybe your project is winding down something. So development is any action that develops, that moves the ball down the field, right? So that could be an act of planning, that could be an act of scoping, that could be an act of specification, design, architecture, maybe acquiring new tools, resources. Any of this stuff is developing the project. Now, typically the way that word gets used is actually just in specification and in delivery activities. Sometimes in verification and validation, but most of the time it's used just to refer to those 2 tasks that lead to the solution, right? One from the need, which is specification, and the other from the resource pool, which is delivery. So I would use that word a little differently, only because it is really related to any form of development, any act of development, which I don't know about you, but I think sitting down for an hour and scoping out a project with your team is a very, very good use of time, very important for developing your project, wouldn't you say? I don't know about you, but validating that your solution worked and using that output as input for the next round of iteration, for some good old-fashioned feedback, that seems like pretty good project development to me. So I'm gonna say any form of work is a type of project development. In that sense, you're just doing work. Cool, check. Project leadership. Project leadership is more about, hey, are you able to allocate tasks? Are you the one pointing people, giving people responsibility, putting people on task, holding them responsible and accountable to their role, to their tasks, and moving forward, getting stuff done? Are you the one driving? You're the momentum, you are the bottleneck breaker, you are on a crusade to make it happen, to get an output, right? If that's you, you're being a project leader, right? And all that is saying is you're driving, you're pushing for projects to get done. You are leading a project. That's pretty good. Project management is another one. What do we mean by project management? Well, it seems pretty obvious. You're managing the product or project, excuse me. So you're the person who's ensuring, maybe you're double checking, you're verifying and validating that the team itself is living up to what they agreed to do. Might not necessarily be leading the project, you're not championing things to get done, you're not getting people pumped, you're not holding people accountable. Let's say that as the nice way of saying it. Maybe a manager is just having stand-up meetings. You're going to be doing your check-ins. You're going to be going down the checklists. Hey, did you get that closed out? Did that design spec get completed? Did you send that out for review? What was the feedback, right? Making sure you're just managing the workflow of the project. Now, managers can be leaders and leaders can be managers. But you always know, sometimes the manager is not the project lead, right? Sometimes the lead, whether it's in role or just de facto, is the person who's actually getting the team stinking pumped up, right? They're the person who said, hey, I'm gonna spend all day doing a sprint and I'm gonna, get this bottleneck unlocked or this log jam unlocked. And I'm gonna get that deliverable to you all by the end of the day. And I'm just super pumped, right? They're the project lead. They're the one who is making it happen, Captain. They're the ones who are saying, hey guys, let's sit down and let's scope this out. Hey, did you take that perspective into account? Did you consider that, oh, given that, maybe we should do something different, right? They're the charismatic. You don't have to be charismatic. You just have to be taking charge. You have to be the one who really cares. Maybe that's a good distinction. Is the project lead? That's someone who actually cares about the project. They love it. They take care of it and they want to see it be successful. A manager, from my experiences, you're just going through the motions of checking things out, checking things off, making sure it happens, but maybe not as much ownership. Okay, maybe not as much ownership. Project strategy is another term. How do we see that through the lens of making pattern? Project strategy, that's just an act, right? You can be strategic about anything. You can be strategic about scoping. You can be strategic about provisioning, right? You can be strategic about delivery. So if you're being strategic, you're just being strategic in your approach to the project, being strategic to your approach to each of the tasks. So that's just a skill. So I don't even know what that means. Hopefully everyone's being strategic. I don't know what an unstrategic project is. Maybe it's just someone who's just doing stuff and hoping it works. I'm guilty of that. But hopefully everyone here knows how to be strategic in life. Project risks. Risks are everywhere. It's very similar to strategy, right? Project risk, well, that's just any sort of threat or unknown. Those are two types of risks, right? Threats and unknowns. The known knowns, the unknown unknowns, the unknown knowns, those four things. The known unknowns, those risks. But those can come to anything, right? There's unknown and there's a variability and risk in anything we do. So there's obviously going to be variability and unknowns to any of the tasks, right? Doesn't matter if you're validating or specifying something, you're getting something nailed down. There's always the surprises. So that's project risk. In terms of planning, well, once again, you could think about it holistically of saying, hey, the project planning is the scoping. That is where a lot of project planning happens, is in scoping, but also in specification, right? But then you also need a plan, maybe an implementation plan. Well, that's part of specification too. But you also need a plan for how you're going to verify. Well, that could also be seen as a part of specification. So planning is going to be a part of every task just the same. So therefore, you need a provisioning plan, a plan of how we're going to get all the resources we need. So project planning to me, just like all of these, doesn't really mean a whole heck of a lot. And that's really what I wanted to talk about today, which is really a lot of the words that we use in project work and project activities don't really mean a whole heck of a lot if you don't have something a little deeper to think about. If you're not building your house on something a little bit more firm in its foundations. And you really need an idea of what a project is, or else what are we planning? Just some arbitrary tasks? How do we know how to bucket them up? How do we know how to demarcate and distinguish who does what? And what are even the roles, right? If I don't know the difference between a skeletal system and a neurological system, then how do I, if I'm a biologist, know what I'm studying, right? These distinctions matter because it helps us to stay focused. It helps us to understand the natural joints of the body project, right? In the same way that I can say, hey, I broke my arm, broke my wrist, let's say. I broke a bone in my wrist. Well, that's really great. If you don't know what a bone is, or the skeletal system, how do you know how the heck do you even think about it, right? You say, I broke my arm. Well, that could be anything, right? It could mean I collapsed all of the arteries or the veins and vessels in my arm, or maybe it just means I got a burn on my skin, right? Maybe it just means that I singed all the hair off my arm, or maybe it just means there's some weird neurological pulsing through my arm, right? Well, it's all broken, right? My arm's equally broken. It's not functioning correctly. We need these distinctions to understand the parts of our own body, right? So that we can be healthy. Well, do you think that we need distinctions about the parts of a project so that the project can be healthy? Seems like that's a pretty obvious thing to me, that we would need that. So, and without it, how do we go about diagnosing problems, right? So we could say at the end of a project, when everything fails, we can say, oh, we needed more project strategy. What does that even mean? Oh, we needed to do better project planning. What does that even mean? Oh, we needed better project development. Cool, yeah, I mean, stuff needed to happen more. Great, right? These words all of a sudden become crutches. They become little blame shifting business jargon that doesn't really mean a whole heck of a lot. And unless you have a clear idea of what a project is, you don't really even know how to diagnose what's broken, right? My arm's broken, the project's broken. Okay, well, if you don't understand the parts of a project, what part of the project is broken? I don't know. I just know the arm's broken. We should cut it off. Let's not do that. Let's slow down. Let's actually figure out what the heck the parts of a project are first, and then we can diagnose it, and then we can fix it. So making pattern provides the language and the ideas and the structure of how things connect, right? It gives you the plumbing of how a project works. So that way when someone says, hey, we needed better project development or better project planning, you could say very clearly, well, what part of the project needed better planning? Did we need better scoping up front? Did we need better provisioning plan? How we were gonna get the resources? Did we need better verification lists? What exactly did we need to plan better for? That is powerful. That will make you very, very capable, very, very smart in that room, and also help you save a lot of pain, because now you can't just blame shift, you're getting surgical, right? Again, the arm is broken. I want to know what exactly is broken. And so for you and for me, for everybody, right? As we learn how projects are working, how they are structured, it enables better diagnosis, better diagnostics of when projects are having a hard time beyond, I can't say this enough, beyond throwing jargon, beyond throwing catchphrases, beyond throwing business gobbledygook at the wall and blame shifting, okay? So that is the thought of the day. The thought of the day being, what is the worst blame shifting you've seen? What is the worst gobbledygook business jargon you've seen in project management for when things aren't working right? And it's because they actually don't have an idea of what the heck a project even is. And so that when things start breaking down, things get personal. Oh, it's Tom's fault. Yeah, that's right, it's Tom's fault. Tom is a big jerk, and because of him, this whole project failed, right? We get real personal real quick, but it wasn't Tom's fault. You know what it was? Is that we didn't spend enough time doing clear specification. So when Tom went to go implement, he made some decisions that weren't discussed, and that had cascading failures down the road that actually led to project failure because you didn't budget enough time. You didn't budget enough time to allow for sufficient verification so that when he went to go do testing and you guys found some bugs because of miscommunication, you ran out of time for delivery and your project failed. And now it's Tom's fault. Yeah, sure. And I think that's the frustration, right? Is when we start throwing out business jargon, we start blaming, we start doing things that is just a cover up for the fact that we're ignorant. It's a cover up for the fact that we don't know what the heck went wrong because we don't understand projects well enough to understand how to even diagnose. We don't even have the language to diagnose what happened, where the breakdown occurred, right? And so you first have to learn, right? Imagine trying to be a doctor. Back to the arm. Imagine trying to be a doctor and you don't understand how the body works. Imagine trying to solve a broken arm if you don't even know the parts of an arm? This is a serious problem. You're gonna be very ineffective. I mean, would you wanna go to that doctor, right? Would you wanna go work for someone who doesn't even understand what a project is? Would you want them helping you run a project? So that when things go wrong, they are just gonna pull out the arm saw, the bone saw, and get to hacking. We don't want that. I don't want that. I don't want that for you, and I don't want that for me. So anyway, that is all for today, and until next time.